Hey guys, this is Jason
This
Douglas.
is Adam MacArthur, voice of Yuji Itadori.
This is Derek Snow, the voice of Shinra Kusakabe.
This is Phil Parsons, voice of Kenny the Ripper Ackerman.
It's Merc Nguyen. You are watching Voice of the Heroes. Take it away, Flea Boy.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. It's your host, the one and only one, Flea Boy Jetson, and you're watching the #1 podcast in the world, Voice of the Heroes. So if you're tuning in for the first time, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. It'll help us out a lot here on the channel. And click that notification bell so you don't miss any interviews or discussions on your favorite heroes and villains from around the world. And today we're shining our spotlight on a very special guest. You may have heard him in Fairy Tail, Fist of the North Star, Vampire Hunter D, My Hero Academia, Attack on Titan, One Piece, and so much more. I'm talking about he's voiced over 300 and something characters over the last 4 decades of working this business with 4 BTVA awards and 20 nominations. Let's welcome David Wald to the channel. How you doing, sir?
Hello, what's happening with y'all?
We're doing great. Thank you so much for coming through. So let's start at the beginning, huh? 4 decades of doing this work.
Well, 20 years in anime, 40 years in entertainment in some facet or another, but yeah.
Yeah, because I seen one of the credits I seen for you, right, was Vampire Hunter D. And that came out in 1985. So when I seen that, I said, wow. And mind you, that was my first introduction into anime. Well, I believe movie-wise.
It was mine too. Although, Flea Boy, the dub that we did, the dub that I was in of Vampire Hunter D was a later dub. Like the one that happened in 85, that was done by another company. So I don't remember what year it was, like, you know, somewhere early 2000s, Sentai Filmworks did another dub for it, which happens a lot, you know, when the licenses for these shows sort of pass hands. Sometimes you can't also buy a license for an existing dub. You know, you have to go to different people for that, or sometimes the tape just doesn't exist anymore, so there's nothing to acquire, you know what I mean? So, but it's I think more often a licensing issue than a tape is disappeared issue. But I'm not sure what it was with Vampire Hunter D, but the dub we did for that was a later one that Sentai did. And it was funny because Vampire Hunter D is one of the first anime I ever watched either. And you know, I only ever watched a few anime before I actually got into the business. But Vampire Hunter D was one of them. Blew my mind. But I watched that same one you're talking about.
Yeah, that was actually a really good anime. That, and I think the second one was Heavy Metal, I believe, was one of them.
Yeah.
It was movies that I wasn't supposed to touch that I end up touching anyway and put in the VCR.
Of course you did.
So let me ask you, right, who's your longest running character you played? Is it Toki or Gajeel?
It's probably going to be Gajeel from Fairy Tail. He's been going quite a while and just came back. We're doing the Fairy Tail 100-year quest now, which is dubbing, you know, right now. Which is amazing. It's amazing to revisit these kids again after a couple of years away now. I don't even remember. I think we started on that dub in maybe 2017 or before then. It was before then, certainly. I think the last dub we did on it was 2017. So yeah, it's been that one's continues.
Work is always great when it continues, huh?
Amen, Flea Boy. Amen.
So let's talk a little bit about Fairy Tail 100-year quest and your role in that. And for those who don't know a little bit about your character.
Well, Gajeel is now he's a member of the Fairy Tail Guild with the main kids. He's the Iron Dragon. That's, you know, that's his action. So he started as an enemy in another guild, fought with the kids. They made friends, and then he joined Fairy Tail. So now he's there, you know, brooding anti-hero with attitude.
Love it. Love it. That'd be the best characters,
Yeah.
the anti-heroes.
Yes, yes, yes. I mean, Gajeel's an interesting cat. He's pretty rough around the edges. In fact, jagged, literally jagged around the edges. But those, you're right. Those are always a lot of fun to play. You get away with a lot of attitude and silliness in characters like that.
And also your character Toki in Fist of the North Star, right? Let's talk a little bit about the new movie coming out that's to be announced. I don't know if you could talk much on it because of NDAs and things like that, but we do know from behind the voices that you're credited for another Toki role in the latest movie coming out. Is there anything you could tell us about that or when it should be coming out?
Well, they don't tell us generally, mostly so that we don't tell you before the right time. Because generally you guys know that information before I do. But yeah, it's been we worked already on a couple of those Fist of the North Star titles, and it's incredibly cool to step into those characters, who've been around for so long and been treated in so many different ways. But yeah, Toki, the old Buddhist big brother. He's been fun. I also got to assistant direct on a couple of those titles for Sound Cadence, which is, directing is kind of like my favorite thing to do in this business, really. So that was really fun. It was really fun to step into that.
That's awesome. Where did you come up with some of the creation for some of these voices for these iconic characters? Is it something that you think about mentally, like, you know what, I'm gonna base it off this person I know, or I'm gonna inspire it off of this character or something like that?
Well, you get a lot of clues. You know what I mean? You have the first thing we'll do when we walk into the studio, and many is the time I don't know what I'm doing until I literally physically get there. So, and if it's a new character, then the first thing we'll do is we'll watch a scene of that character in the Japanese, in the original or in the original language, whatever it may be. And you'll get cues from that, how the character kind of carries himself, how he resonates compared with the other characters in the scene. That'll help feed you an idea of the vibe of that character, because it's sort when we dub these titles over here, it's more like doing theater in that, when you do a play, if you do a performance of Hamlet, for example, that play's hundreds of years old and has been interpreted by actors for thousands of years. You know what I mean? So like, you're stepping into that river along with all those other actors. It's kind of the same when you're dubbing. And though, and everybody kind of treats it a bit differently. For my own part, I listen to what the Japanese actor is doing vocally initially and make sure there's not for example, a special signature or a particular laugh or a particular, you know what I mean? A noise that's endemic to that character that's irreplaceable. Seldom is that really the case. And I'll sort of use that as a cue and then interpret it through my own apparatus. So I'm not very good at doing like impressions. I just never was very good at that at all. So I don't think of it as channeling, that reminds me of this other actor. I'll do a nod to that other actor. I don't really function that way. I just sort of find the attitude of the character and then cop that attitude and then deliver the language,
What do you think was
I can do that. Other people can do like taxes. Some people can play the guitar. That's what I can do. You know what I mean?
That's awesome. What do you think was the most difficult character for you to dub?
Ooh. Well, I mean, physically, probably one of the hardest things I ever did was I did the voice of Zeku in Street Fighter V. in a game, the video game. And that was a tremendous amount of yelling. And often, because it's Street Fighter, yelling attacks in Japanese. And I don't speak Japanese. So having, your pronunciation altered and modified, and you're doing it. So like physically, it was really, really, really difficult. Emotionally, boy, tough to answer that question. It's every one of them is kind of its own journey, and every one of them kind of lets you travel a bit down a road that you may have never traveled before. And I find all those experiences really like personally fulfilling and rewarding. As actors, we get a chance to sort of do the thing that everybody says, which is walk a mile in another pair of shoes, to an extent. It's not the same as living someone else's life, but it's like you can adopt a view of things. You can get a sense of other perspectives and other priorities that other humans have, and sort of revel in that, dance with it for a while. I don't know if I could pick one above all the others that was the most like emotionally challenging or taxing. Because for me, they're all really great opportunities to just sort of stretch into new territory and experiment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think maybe the hardest hitting, the one I really had to like ready myself for, was actually an extremely brief appearance. And it was in, I directed a dub for the movie Stranger by the Shore. And the two main characters were two boys in love in that show. And I had to play I didn't have to, I chose to play one of the characters' dads, who was extremely homophobic. And, we only see him in a flashback, and he kicks the kid out of the house. He's very not understanding. And it was tough to do that. But I essentially I chose to do it because I wanted that, when you hear a homophobic remark out of the mouth of a queer actor like myself, then you get a sense of an acute and specific memory, because as members of the LGBTQ community, like all of our experiences with that are acute and specific, right? So I know that a certain portion of the people who will watch that dub know who I am and know that about my work, and will hear me saying those words, and it'll dig a little harder. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But also, I didn't want to ask another actor to come into my booth as a known queer director and ask them to be like a homophobic jerk. That would be a difficult ask for any actor to come in and do. You know what I mean? So I just did it. And like I said, it was just a couple of lines, but it certainly had that acute and specific effect on me. And I hope some of the people who watched.
What's one of the lines that resonates with you on a personal level from your characters?
Oh boy, I don't know that I could choose a specific line, but the character Inosuke and Adam in Skate the Infinity from a couple of years ago, I found him a really meaningful presence. He was wild and chaotic and a bit of a ham, and a very, sort of destructive force. But he had this degree of security in himself that caused him to be able to say and do these wild things that most people would be far too reserved to say or do. And it's always really it's like when you're an actor playing a role like that, it's a little bit like you being your own life coach for a couple of recording sessions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes characters like that to remind us as actors of our own courage and our own willingness to stand up and our own, steadfastness. but like I said, there's something like that to be gained from any character you play. It could be a guy walking down the street who just says, "Hi, how are you this morning?" Which those studios, I have to go find an actor to do. You know what I mean? But like it just it's a chance to walk in another pair of shoes, as I said, and it's enormously enriching, personally.
Was there any projects that was a little maybe overwhelming to voice that you was in? Like, oh man, because I know a lot of voice actors are real critical of themselves and their performances, especially if they're invested in the project. Was that any case for you?
No, I think I kind of go in with a clean slate when I'm going in to play a role. And even uh for example, we were talking about Vampire Hunter D earlier. And I saw that same dub that you did, and like it was one of very few anime titles I had seen before I went in and worked and started working in the business. I got into the business as an actor. A director came and saw me in a play that I was performing in and brought me in based on that. So I was already a working actor when I started doing this stuff. So I didn't approach it as a fan or an audience member. I had never had that experience. Um, but uh, doing Count Magnus in that dub, like, um, I'm sorry, Flea Boy, I talked myself into a corner. Remind me what the question was again. I lost where I was going.
The question was basically, did you face any difficulties going into a project, or was it a
Oh,
little
an
too?
overwhelming character. Yes, thank you, thank you. I'm with you. Um, uh, that was a bit overwhelming because of its presence in my memory. It was a very difficult thing to get past. Just like it would be very difficult as a stage actor to go play the role of Hamlet. For some actors, it would be very difficult to go and play the role of Hamlet in a play if you've just seen a really great play with a really great Hamlet in it and not like be tempted to dip into that performance and take little things that actor did, and you know what I mean. The
Yeah.
temptation can be strong. So Vampire Hunter D was one of those few titles that lived in my memory before I got a chance to work on it, and so I had to work extra hard to do what I try always to do as an actor when I'm walking into the booth for the first time on a new role. Is It's a clean slate, and no matter what I already know about that character, I've got to look to the animation to show me what kind of person that is, and in particular, I have to talk with the director about the person that is, because if I look into something too deeply, if I research an anime or a character or something too heavily and get too well acquainted with it before I go into work on it, then I'm in danger of being predisposed, making a lot of creative decisions before I've consulted with the director. And then, that can put you that can sort of break you up as an actor. And it can make it very difficult to like move outside of that and be responsive to what the director is asking from you if it's different from what you thought about going in. So I try to always have a clean slate and let the director tell me what they want, let the animation show me what it wants, and then roll my dice on it. And then the director will say, you know, that's great, we'll keep it. Or I like that, but can you make him a little bit, I don't know, make him a little friendlier, a little warmer, or something like that. And then
Yeah.
like the performance that I render fits with the animation that I'm watching, but also with the director's vision of how that's all going to come together. And that's the person in charge. The director is the one who has to record all these separate actors and get all these different performances and then weave them all together into a sonorous performance, a sonorous tale that makes sense, when you hear two actors talking with each other. And of course, that job also falls to the engineers who are extraordinary, the mix engineers. It's a long process before that thing gets posted on the website or whatever. But No, I try not to go in with too many preconceptions. Um, and I had some preconceptions to combat when I went in for Vampire Hunter D. So that made the process kind of difficult initially, but soon with the directors, Matt Greenfield, I was able to sort of release what I thought he should be from my previous experience with him and let the director tell me what he needed it to be, you know.
Okay. Now, with 4 BTVA awards and 20 nominations, what do you feel like is your most accomplishment that you had in your life? Like, what do you feel like is that pinnacle goal?
Well, um, as far as like a specific role or something like that, I don't really have one. I'm sort of an old school journeyman actor. I'm looking at what's coming. You know what I mean? I'm looking at what's already coming onto my plate, and I try to absorb myself in whatever that task is. Um, I do have a little dream one day of voicing either a superhero or a supervillain. It's
Mm.
what I always wanted to do when I was a kid. Superheroes were like super my thing.
Let
Um,
me ask
and
you
I've
if you
always wanted to do something
could.
like that.
Let me ask you if you could, Marvel or DC?
Oh, there's so much great stuff in either of those universes or many of the ones beyond, you know. Um, uh, I, I never got like the Marvel versus DC contention in the fandom. I think they're both great sources of great stories. You know what I mean? So I couldn't choose.
Oh, so who was your
But
favorite
playing,
superhero growing up?
oh, I went through so many phases, but probably the one that has always sort of the moment I met her, she occupied like the highest tier plane. She was Omega level in my rating of all superheroes, and that was Storm,
Oh,
especially with that mohawk, coolest thing I've ever seen. I adore Storm. That's my girl. Storm is my girl. Um,
how did you
I
feel
can't.
about that X-Men 97 reboot of the
It was really
animation?
fun. You know, it's funny you mentioned. I just finished watching that just like a week or so ago. It had taken me a while to get to it on my list, you know. But it was really fun, like stepping into that old world again. I thought they did a beautiful job of rendering that animation in a way that was, you know, contiguous, you know, with the previous. Um, and the storytelling was dead on. I mean, I really loved it. And of course, you got a nice little feature of Aurora in there, her whole situation. I won't spoil it. But yeah, fun to watch. I'm always been a big X-Men fan, but all superheroes are game for me, and supervillains who are usually more fun anyway. So as far as roles go, that's as close as I get to like coveting a role. As far as like accomplishments in general in anime, um, there's one that's like far and away the most important to me, which is around 2014, 2015. I started, you know, behind the scenes banging on doors of studios and trying to talk them into uh, finding some of these queer dubs, you know, these queer anime titles, because there are so many titles that dealt with LGBTQ issues that existed in anime for years before the West ever started telling that story in any kind of reasonable way. And I felt really strongly about it. I know there's an audience out there that desperately needs it, you know, that feels alienated and doesn't deserve to feel alienated anymore. And I actually got to make some headway in that sphere. And
Going through that process of that, did you face any discriminations?
oh, sure, yeah. I mean, that's you know, it's going to be everywhere you go. You know what I mean? There's always going to be a chance to encounter that everywhere you go. And it's not like all the people who are homophobic racist or whatever, any of the hatreds that people harbor, it's not like they all go get together and hang out in one place. You know what I mean? They're everywhere. They're peppered throughout all the universe, or at least in our world.
You're right
And
about that.
so you're gonna encounter that. And yeah, I definitely, you know, I grew up I was a kid of the late 70s and early 80s, right? And it was very different back then being a gay person. Your only option was to just stay in the closet, or any number of terrible things could happen to you. That's changed a lot in the years that I've been around, and something that Michael Tatum said once. We were paneling on this topic together, and he was talking about how pleased he is to see now that, like, quite the reverse of when we were kids. If you're in a room full of people, just any room full of average people, smattering of humanity, in 1981, and someone makes like a homophobic joke, everyone in the room just like laughs but now if someone does that, the whole room is like, oh no, like people stand up against that now. And that's something I never saw in my childhood, even when, like, even, people who knew that someone was gay and was watching them getting bullied or traumatized, but even then didn't have the courage to stand up and say something because of the affiliations that then meant for them. It was a very treacherous time, and things are way different now, but different, better in some ways, but not all of them better. And one of the problems you have today is that there is still plenty of homophobia, just like there's still today in 2024 is plenty of racism and plenty of other, religious persecution. It still goes on. It goes on everywhere. But because of the society we're in now, it makes you less popular to voice those things brazenly. So what you have to watch out for is the quiet haters. You know what I mean? The ones who won't necessarily spit in your face, but will make sure to scuttle you along the way and just sort of keep you down and keep you off their desk. You know what I mean?
Yes, sir.
And that still exists. Unfortunately, it still exists, and I did contend with it. I continue to contend with it, but you know, that's why I had to do what I did. That's why I had to go bang on the doors I banged on. And as a result of that, a number of, like, quality dubs of LGBTQ plus titles made it down the pipe. And I got to work on a bunch of them. Other studios did a few. And now it's not that uncommon to see those titles. Whereas before that, nobody would touch those with a 10-foot pole. You'd almost never get a dub of something that
Even
was like,
characters now in most media, you will see a LGBTQ character on, whether it be titles like Invincible. The main
yeah,
character's best friend is,
yeah,
you know, Agatha all along is diving
mm-hmm,
into that, things like
mm-hmm,
that. So, most of media today, and to me, I look at it like this from my personal point of view. If it suits the story, who cares? As long as the story is good, I don't care about nobody's sexuality, nobody's religion, none of that. I just want to see a good story.
yeah,
Now, I could see if you're doing it just to do it, then I have a problem with it, because it's like, all right, this was completely unnecessary and doesn't fit the story. And I think that's what most people's problems are. But when you do it right, it can be so good. Like Invincible is the perfect example of
oh
that.
yeah,
Agatha, I think, is another example of that. And so many other great stuff that Netflix has done, and I think, I haven't seen it too much in anime, maybe because I haven't, seen too many of the anime titles that you've been on, but I do need to check it out because I'm open for any type of story that's good that revolves around anything. It doesn't
Well,
really matter.
that's what we're in the business of doing, really, isn't it? Is telling stories. And, you got to make sure the story is good. And, what was sad is that so many of those good stories were getting bypassed. And, yeah, the truth is, that's something that really kind of, as you were talking about Western animation and Western work and how it's very much, it's way better now than it used to be. I mean, it used to be that we didn't see any examples of ourselves in any Western media unless it was like the worst possible example. They were serial killers or whatever. Those days are going by. But the thing that awakened me to the presence of all this content in anime was because again, I didn't have an encyclopedic knowledge of past anime when I started working in the business, right? So we did a dub of Akame ga Kill, and I got to dub Bulat in that show. And Bulat is canonically gay. It's mentioned, it's talked about, they have a minute of fun about it. And then that's it.
That's right. He is.
He's other things.
I forgot
He's
about
other things
him.
that are more important than being gay. He's a teacher, he's a mentor, he's a warrior, he's a friend. All those things in that show are more important elements of Bulat than his sexual identity. And I had never seen that happen in anything, in any Western media at that time or any anime. But some friends of mine who knew a lot more about anime than I did or do started getting me hip to titles, not only that featured, queer characters in a very LGBTQ centric storyline, but also characters who were just happened to be trans or gay or lesbian or bisexual or asexual. Like all these things existed in anime. And in many cases, not all of them certainly, but in many cases, it wasn't just like Bulat and Akame ga Kill. It wasn't their only contribution to the narrative. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They were a full, rich character who was, oh yeah, also gay. I've had script writers and hopeful writers ask me in panels before about how you write a queer character. And my answer has always been the same. You take away the queerness and you see if you still have an interesting character. If you do, continue.
You know what I think
restart.
is a great example of what you just said? What's the creator of X-Men 97? What he did with Morph, making Morph non-binary and making him, more queer in that show. It didn't take away from the Morph we knew. It actually added on and made Morph like more of a spotlight. Like he was one of my favorite in that show.
Yeah, because the thing about Morph is it makes perfect sense, right? Like he's an amorphous creature. He doesn't have any like specific real form, or the one that he does have when he defaults to it is blank. It's a blank slate. It's literally a blank slate. So it makes perfect sense that that character would be sort of gender fluid and sexually ambiguous or at least he would have a much further reaching reach of sexual interest being a character like that. And I think the only difference between the Morph from that and the Morph of yesteryear is that yesteryear they were afraid to make that point about Morph, even though it was really obvious just because of the nature of the character. Same for Mystique. We got a lot more like sort of lesbian themed in-plots about Mystique as time went on, and writers got braver and audiences got more tolerant of that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's really brave and really unique what they did with her in the comics. And the whole twist with, no spoilers, I'm not gonna give y'all too much, but Nightcrawler's origins, and it's just really, really, good to see storytelling wise how far we came from the 90s into the 2000s and so on. My next question, right? Are there any upcoming or ongoing anime series you would like to be a part of that you might have seen or you may have heard about and like, wow, that would be pretty cool if I can get a role in that?
Oh, I would jinx myself terribly if I answered that question. But no, the like really honestly, like I said, it's like I don't go hunting through the what's new in anime lists and find like the ones I think are most interesting. Because as an actor, and I spent most of my life as an actor, like, but I'm old now, right? I've been doing it a long time, and I'm in my 50s now, and like I'm smarter about this. If you start to covet a role or a specific opportunity or anything that's that narrow, like all you're doing is setting yourself up for a very high likelihood of disappointment because not only will you probably not get that thing you hope for, no matter who you are or how much you want it, but also once you get there, you may find out it's different than you imagined it is. And then that's a whole other sphere of disappointment. So, like, I did it when I was young. When I was really young, particularly when I was I was acting almost completely in on stage in those years, and like I'd know a play was coming, I'd know it's happening at a theater that I worked at before that I love, and that I can't wait to work there again. They like me, I know there's a good chance I'll be cast in it, and like I'd see a role and I'd go, oh, that's the one I want, and I'd think about it and like chew on it and show up at the audition and make sure I was the like most prepared. I'd already memorized all the scenes. And like when it worked, it was like, yeah, that all paid off. But when it didn't work, it was like, how many hours of my life did I spend sweating over that?
Yeah.
And like, just to be here, And when you get that wrapped up in a thing, particularly in the theater, and just like in anime, you'll audition for a thing and chances are they'll send you audition sides, which is like a short version of a script that you'll get for purpose of an audition. It's got like a few lines on it. Those are audition sides. So you'll get audition sides. A new show's coming up. They want auditions, and there are 4 characters in the audition sides. But they're actually casting 30 characters, and they're just listening to all those reads to see, oh yeah, he acted that role really well, but he sounds a little bit more like this character who wasn't in the audition. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, again, you covet a role, you dream about a role, you fixate on a particular specific role or goal. And even if you are fortunate enough to be rewarded with a different one, like it gets harder to appreciate it. You know what I mean? So I don't covet. I don't covet roles, and I don't go like hunting for them to go, oh, that's the one I want to be in. The one I want to be in is the one I'm in. It's the director I like working with. It's like,
Let's talk a little bit about that though. The roles that you were in, the animes you were in, and people who directed you. If you could name your top 3 projects that you were in anime wise, what would it be?
Wow. Well, so many different like sets of parameters to apply. I think the one that had like probably the most, is actually Gajeel in Fairy Tale was the one that I had just started working for what was then Funimation. I had been down in Houston working for ADV Films, which then became Sentai Filmworks. And I really wanted to spread up to Dallas and start working for Funimation so that I could do more of this, right? So I came up to Dallas. I think the first thing I worked on was Polly in One Piece. I think that might have been the very first thing I ever recorded for Funimation. And then, floated around different directors' booths for a little while. But getting Gajeel in Fairy Tale was the one that like sort of gave me some recognition in and amongst that Dallas community, because I was now playing a fairly prominent, supporting character in what was at the time one of their biggest titles. So just like mathematically, reasons of timing and cosmic alignment, like that came at a really good time, and also managed to be a very fun show with with great people
Yeah,
involved
it
in it,
definitely is.
and a really fun character to play. You know, sort of the soft-hearted bad boy. Loved it.
So Fairy
So
Tale will
that
be
was a
number
big
one.
deal. Fairy Tale would be one. I'll give you three. I'll put them in no order whatsoever. But
All
Fairy
right.
Tale is definitely one. Pardon. Another one would be Skate the Infinity,
Mm.
which we only did just a couple of years ago. But for so many years, at that point, I had been trying to convince the powers that be in the anime dubbing business, you know, the brass, the real brass, how valuable it would be for them to speak directly to their queer audience with authenticity and acknowledgement. And I had taken meeting after meeting, given speech after speech on the matter, made little steps forward, you know, a couple of steps forward in communicating and understanding, a couple of steps back when a few weeks would go by and they'd forget about it, and you know, whatever. It was very, very difficult process. But there was a line that I sort of improved in the booth, that became for a while a sort of anthem of the queer community,
Mm.
of the queer fandom in the anime community.
What was the line?
It was the character of Adam, who, as I said, is wildly outlandish, bursts onto the scene and addresses a giant crowd by saying, "Hey, bitches and bros and non-binary hoes." And you know, crazy things happen when we're playing around in the booth. You know what I mean, Flea Boy? But we did that, and the response to that, and you know, and Adam was a sort of villainous character. You know, he was a shady dude, but he was the kind of villain you love. You know, like I felt like he was really informed by Dr. Frankenfurter on Rocky Horror. You know, sort of this doomed, tragic figure who's morally completely reprehensible, but also somehow so like you can be so empathetic with him. You know what I mean? Adam was kind of that. And you know, when that line happened, like the viewership of that show expanded exponentially. Just like the view numbers doubled,
Shut up.
tripled, more. Um, and the way the queer community, and particularly the non-binary community specifically, the non-binary and the trans community, like they there's very little in anime dubbing in history that acknowledges them and sees them and treats them with authenticity. It's very difficult to find that. And I think the way they felt just being acknowledged and being spoken aloud, addressed by this prominent character in this prominent anime, it really like galvanized and electrified them. And that happened, you know, all the work I'd done, Flea Boy, to like sell this idea and like get producers to like, okay, we'll dub one, and like all the trials and tribulations. And that one improvised line like made my point louder than any meeting I'd ever taken. You know what I mean? And that's still having an effect on production choices made.
That's so awesome, man. That
So
you.
yeah, like that one was a breakthrough for me for a lot of reasons, but also just because I adored playing that character so much. He was so complicated, and he got to say stuff like that with no consequence.
I ain't gonna front. I might have to
Kind of
go watch
brilliant.
that anime now just for that line. I'm gonna have to
It's
watch it.
fun. It's
I'm
it's
gonna.
I tell you, man, it's really fun and it's really funny. And like there's sort of there's a queer undercurrent to it, a little bit more than there is in like all sports anime, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
But like it's not the point. And the point is these two friends who are skating, learning to skate, teaching, you know, one of them is teaching the other to skate, and they're forming this friendship, and all through the you know, all through the veil of this really like dangerous super dead man's skate course. Like the skating sequences are incredible. It's a great show for a lot of reasons.
So
But
that would be
just that one element
so
is
that
the
would be
reason
two
that
out of the three. What will be your third one?
the third one probably Galgo 13, Galgo 13, the series. Because that was another one of those weird moments. I keep saying how little anime I saw. I can tell you on one
Put me
hand.
on to this one because I don't think I ever seen this one. Put me on to
Yeah.
like what the anime is.
So when I was a kid, I watched Speed Racer and I watched Battle of the Planets, which was Gatchaman, but Battle of the Planets on Saturday mornings. It's all the anime I ever saw. Years later in the 90s, I'm working in a Blockbuster Video. Remember those? And
Yes, I do.
they had a section, it's like one bay of shelves, and it was labeled Japanimation. So I looked through that shelf and, there were, I don't know, I'm guessing, there were probably like 20 titles total on it. And most of them just like didn't really grab my attention. I don't remember what was there. But three titles did. One of them was Vampire Hunter D. One of them was a movie, Galgo 13, The Professional. And one of them was another movie, Grave of the Fireflies. I took all three of those titles home and I watched those, and they were like they provided a wide arc of what could be amazing in anime. You know what I mean? But it was very difficult to find anime then, get other titles. It just wasn't around back then. So like there was no further down that rabbit hole to go. But years later, I did, I dubbed Vampire Hunter D for Sentai. I did a dub of Grave of the Fireflies as well. And I got to play Galgo 13 in the series Galgo 13, which was super cool. Galgo 13, it's an older title. He's huge in Japan. He has been for years and years and years. He's basically like Japan's version of James Bond, right? Like he's
Oh.
super spy, super tactician. He's an assassin, a little different than James Bond, but he's a professional assassin. And it's just pure, straight up, spy action, title. But I had watched the hell out of that Galgo 13 movie when I rented it. I loved it because, like, at the time, it shared a lot in common with a movie called The Professional, which was also
that's
about
my
a
movie. I
hitman.
love that movie, The
Oh,
Professional, man.
yes, yes,
That's
you and
that's
me,
one of the
man.
goated movies I ever seen, man.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I had read an interview at some point. Again, this was years ago, before there was internet, that Luc Besson, who made The Professional, was partially inspired by Galgo 13. In the advent of the digital age, I've never found any evidence of him ever saying anything like that. But back then, we only had trade magazines and rumors, so who knows if it was true. But they shared a lot in common. And yeah, I love that movie too. Jean Reno, love that actor, love it,
Yeah,
love
that
it.
was a good one.
So yeah, playing Galgo 13 was like one of those moments where my history as a fan of at least that title, like, sort of circled back around and landed on me now as a professional, which I imagine
Mm.
is an experience that's really common for a lot of the actors that are coming into anime today who've like been watching anime all their lives. You know what I mean? Like that's got to happen for them a lot, and that's pretty cool. I don't know if I could withstand it happening every week. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's pretty dope though, man. Those some
Yeah.
great answers. I love them. Now let's go to your Mount Rushmore of voice actors. So
Voice
basically,
actors.
you get to pick four that maybe inspired you, or you admire their work or what they've done for the community or the culture. So who would be your top four voice actors or your Mount Rushmore of voice acting?
Wow. Well, um, first prime on the list by miles, Mel Blanc. Mel Blanc did all those Looney Tunes
Yes,
voices, Bugs
sir.
Bunny, Daffy Duck, Sylvester, Foghorn Leghorn, like all those voices were Mel Blanc. And like Mel Blanc's ability went so far beyond just doing character voices. Like Mel Blanc could do a train, right? And like it was his voice. He'd do like a broken down old car, an old jalopy that's like breaking down, like all that stuff. He did it all. He was like a machine. He was like that guy from the Police Academy movies who just made crazy weird noises all the time. That was Mel Blanc decades before that guy. And like he was the Mozart of voice actors.
Yeah,
basically.
I think he's the GOAT, man. I think he's definitely one of the GOATs.
Yeah, that's definitely. Frank Welker is another one. It's just done so much stuff and has such a broad range. For me, I'd have to say on my Mount Rushmore for completely personal reasons, Don LaFontaine.
I haven't heard from
Don,
him yet.
you know Don. Don LaFontaine was the guy who like originated the. He was the guy who did all those in a world where one man does a thing, someone else will do another thing. That in a world guy, that was Don LaFontaine. And like Don LaFontaine not only had this insane, like rich, bassy voice that everybody just wanted to listen to forever, he invented that format of movie trailer. Like he ran an old recording business with a buddy of his from the army, and like they started farming themselves out doing movie trailers for production. And at the time, movie trailers generally were just, they didn't have voiceover. They just showed like cuts of the movie and then titles, something like that. But he created that format and then dominated it for the rest of his working life. And to this day, like he's a meme now, right? That's Don
Indeed.
LaFontaine.
I love it. I didn't know that. You put me
Yeah,
on.
he's a big deal. Yeah. And old school man, Orson Welles. Orson Welles, who did a lot of like radio stuff. He was a film actor. He was like this spectacular actor. And if that's all he'd ever done, he still would have been just fine. But he was like a Shakespearean. He was a writer director, wrote and directed Citizen Kane, still considered by most like the greatest film ever made. He's the guy who did, if you've ever heard of the old War of the Worlds radio broadcast that everybody listened to and thought was real, and like towns started freaking out, that was Orson Welles.
I'm trying to think which one, because they had a couple of those, right? What
well, there
year
have been a couple of
did it come
movies
out?
of it now, but back in the day, Orson Welles read that. He was doing a radio program, back when they had radio drama, and he was just reading a radio program. And people thought it was real. People thought he was like reading actual news or commentating on actual events, and like people thought it was real, and people became convinced that aliens were actually invading, and it caused this huge panic. But yeah, that was Orson Welles. One of the best actors we've ever had of any discipline. But yeah, he was a voiceover guy.
Hey man, I love that
radio.
Mount Rushmore, man. I got to learn something from it. It's unique. I think we had one. I think the last interview I did had Mel Blancs on it, right? I believe so. But that was unique. I love those answers. We came to the end of the video. Thank you so much, David, for joining us.
We made it.
We definitely made it, man. It was a dope episode. I had such a great time talking to you, and such a great conversation. Heroes and villains, type in the comment section below. Let me know who you like to see next. Also, all links will be provided. Let them know where they can find you at on social media.
Oh, I'm on the Twitters and the Instagrams. It's David Wald _VA on both of those. And that's it.
So make sure y'all go follow, man. Go support. Thank you so much for coming on. And heroes, villains, I love you. If nobody told you so, love yourself, pass that love on, and love others. Until next time, we will see you right here. Don't forget to subscribe for more interviews and discussions on Voice of the Heroes podcast. Peace.
Peace.
Sing it with me, pretty.